Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the voice of global supply chain. Supply Chain Now focuses on the best in the business for our worldwide audience, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and today's critical issues, the challenges and opportunities. Stay tuned to hear from those making global business happen right here on Supply Chain Now.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Scott Luton here with you on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's show. I'm so excited. We've got an outstanding conversation teed up with our guest here today, Tonya Jackson, Senior Vice President, Chief Product Delivery Officer with Lexmark. Tonya, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Scott. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Doing wonderful and doing even better now that I finally get a chance to meet you and we get to dive into your story. We're excited here.
Great. Awesome.
So on that note, Tonya, I want to just level set. We've done a little bit of homework on you. I want to level set on a couple things, make sure I got this right. So for starters, for the three people maybe in the world that aren't familiar with Lexmark, leading global provider of printing and imaging products, software solutions, and services, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay, check one, make sure my homework's right. Secondly, you've been with the company, get this, since its inception in 91. Is that right?
That is correct, Scott. So that means I'm pretty old. Yes. Yeah.
I wouldn't just say that,
All
but
good though.
gosh,
All good.
I can,
All good.
I can only imagine the stories. And I bet when y'all get together for this gathering or the other gathering, I bet folks want to be around rubbing elbows with you because you got all the best stories. Is that right? Is that fair?
We have good stories, and there's been a lot of travel. The best stories come out of the travel.
Mm.
Strange things happen, when you travel.
Well, we're going to try to get into some of those with you here today. Also, folks should know that from 2016 to 2020, you served as the Chief Supply Chain Officer. And then as if that wasn't a big enough plate, your role expanded in 2020 to include even more. Is that right, Tonya?
That's right, Scott. So what we did in 2020 was really reshaped a little bit of our strategy. And so in addition to, as you said, we focus on the core imaging, but we also wanted to move more toward expanding in our adjacencies. So taking some of our core technology that we have in the imaging space, whether it's heating technology, all kinds of scanning technology, and then use that technology for different offerings, right? So
Okay.
to take the engineering expertise that we have and use it in a different way. And then also to expand a lot. You talked about our core imaging. We're also world known for our IoT and cloud enabled imaging technology, right? So in order to get good focus across those three areas, we put R&D, supply chain, and service delivery for our imaging in one area, and it's been an incredible um, strength, especially during the crisis. And we can talk a
Right.
little bit about that. But outstanding group of people across the board, whether they're in separate organizations or not. But when we came together, we're quite a force now.
It seems like it. And, out of a little bit that you shared there, powering information, moving it at the speed of light in an easier, more convenient way, sharing the information that teams around the world need to make decisions faster, make better decisions faster. It seems like one of the things you are powering. So much to cover, so little time, but looking
All
forward to
right.
learning a lot more with Tonya Jackson. So Tonya, I don't know about you. I call myself a supply chain nerd, and we got plenty of stuff to work through. You may be a fellow supply chain nerd like me. But before we get into that, I want to go way
Okay.
back. I want to learn more about Tonya Jackson, kind of maybe pre-executive practitioner. So tell us, where did you grow up, and give us a few aspects of your upbringing. What was inseparable from your upbringing, Tonya?
Okay. Well, I'll go way back to the beginning, and I'm from North Carolina. I'm
Okay,
from Wilson, North Carolina. It's in eastern North Carolina. It's a very small town. Most people say I'm from
okay.
eastern North Carolina, but I'm going to own it. I'm from Wilson, and back in the day, it was called Wide Awake Wilson because
Wide
it wasn't
awake, Wilson.
because it wasn't wide awake, right? And I grew up same house. We stayed on the same. Even when I go home today, I still go back to the same home that's been sold now, of course. But the owner now I welcomes me into the home. So I have
That's cool.
I have I grew up with three brothers. My mother was a school teacher. My father owned his business as a brick mason. It was a generational, kind of business. And eh, the growing up with three brothers was, I think, is a big part of who I am. I received no
Mm.
special treatment as the only girl, and that's probably fair because I was probably more of the instigator than them, and and so I was more into the shenanigans than they were. But love my brothers. We sport. I'm a big sports fan. If you have three brothers, you
Who's your
kind of have
team?
to be. Well, it depends. I'm a for football, for professional football, I'm a Steeler fan.
Okay.
And your next question may be, "You're from North Carolina. How in the world did that happen?" Um,
Right.
but
You're
back at,
reading my mind, Tonya.
I'm trying to do both sides of the microphone. So, in those days, there were 3 channels, right? It wasn't cable, and so the Redskins, the Washington
Yep.
football team now, was our home team in North Carolina.
Right.
And my oldest brother was a Cowboy fan, and I say he was an obnoxious Cowboy fan, but that might
Is
be
there any
redundant.
is there any
That
is
that
there
might
any
be
other kind?
that's fairly
Just
redundant,
kidding.
right? But he was, but Sunday was a big thing for us. We'd all gather at football, and my youngest brother was a Dolphin fan, and the middle one was a Raider fan. But the Cowboys were very good back in those days, and the Redskins, though the home team, I like the Redskins, but the Steelers, though, whenever it mattered, when it was a Super Bowl, they crushed the Cowboys. They destroyed them. So
Right.
therefore, I became a Steeler fan because it would silence my older brother. So I am a diehard Steeler fan, even though they've had some tough times recently. But
Right.
I love the Steelers. I even went to one of their training camps. They have a women's training camp. That's
Okay.
the kind of Steeler fan I am. Yeah, I went and
Man,
did some
okay.
drills recently. Anyway, um,
Well, so one final question about your Steeler fandom. So whenever you
yes,
went to a home game, I've heard a lot. Never been there. I had a cousin that spent some time with Electrolux in Pittsburgh, and he told me, and of course, what I see on TV. Is it Pamani Brothers? It's like a famous restaurant in Pittsburgh. They've got
I
this
think
smash
so.
sandwich. Yeah.
Yes,
So
nice.
okay. So you and I will have to go up to Pittsburgh, take in a Steelers home game, and visit Pamani Brothers. How's that sound?
I'm in. I'm in. As long
Okay.
as it's, not too cold. I like the
Yes.
Steelers, but I don't want to be out there in the cold. Yes, that sounds
It
good.
does.
That sounds good.
It. I bet it didn't get too cold in Wide Awake Wilson because I grew up in South Carolina and all North
Oh
Carolina's a
yeah.
little bit northern, but we're not used to that snow on the ground for a month and 10-degree weather, are
No,
we?
no, the when we had big snowfalls or even little snowfall, when we had a forecast of snow, we didn't go to school. And because the philosophy is it will melt. Just give it time.
Right.
So so
We may
um
be third
it was
cousins, Tanya. We grew up in a very similar environment. So we'll have to investigate that after the fact.
yeah, it didn't snow much,
Um,
but yeah, weather was good. Weather still is good down
yes.
there. Yeah.
So let's one final question about where you grew up. Then I want to get into your journey
Sure.
from Hampton University, up through advanced degrees and supply chain, and then of course in the C-suite where you are today. But food in Eastern North Carolina, Wilson in Eastern North Carolina. Um, the barbecue, of course. You can't say North Carolina
I
not
was
talk
gonna say
barbecue.
you gotta talk about barbecue, and you're from
So
South
what?
Carolina, so you probably have
Right,
mustard barbecue, right? Yeah, we have the vinegar
right.
base. Yes,
Yes,
yes.
I find it all delicious. But Tanya, growing up for you in Wilson, what was like when you think of a barbecue dinner? Build that plate for us. What does that mean to you?
Well, it's gonna be vinegar-based barbecue, coleslaw, sometimes coleslaw on the barbecue on a sandwich, something called that I don't know if many people know about called Brunswick stew, and that's a
Yes.
big thing in North Carolina. Hush puppies or corn
Oh
sticks,
man.
whatever your preference is there. Probably potato salad, collard greens,
Okay. We're
a lot
definitely
of
going to
it.
spend some time and break bread together at some point soon. I would just add one last thing because we could have a barbecue podcast if we blink here. But when I grew up in South Carolina, Aiken, it was hash and rice, which is kind of a play on Brunswick stew. Um,
Ah.
but rice is really big. And man, I tell you what, mustard based barbecue sauce on top of pulled pork, hash and rice slaw, which is really important because you got to cut the kind of the fattiness of the barbecue. Man, we're gonna break some bread together, Tanya. You've made
Yeah,
me
yeah, for
hungry. Thank
sure.
you very
Sure,
much.
sure. So, I mean, that's I like I said, I grew up in Wilson, still very close to a lot of people in Wilson. Many of us who went to school together, even though we've gone separate ways, very, very, still very close. And we were raised about, how I think it takes a village. I think we were raised that way before that was a thing. It was just a
Mm.
very close knit community.
So on that, you're talking about folks you went to school together. You went where is Hampton University?
Hampton University is in Hampton, Virginia, which is near Norfolk. It's our tagline, if you will, is "Home by the Sea" because it's
Okay,
right on the coast. It's a beautiful campus. Um, I may dare you to find a prettier campus. It's just a very very pretty. It's just a very pretty campus. It is a historically black college. My mother went to Hampton, and so we would visit for homecoming and those types of things. So I was familiar with the campus. I did apply to. I was headed to Chapel Hill, obviously, if you're in North Carolina, and I think we went to a football game at Hampton or something right around that time. And I had like kind of was making a decision, and it was
right.
the atmosphere and I just made the decision to go to Hampton at that time. And my youngest brother, we're about 18 months apart, so we're very close even still to this day. He also went to Hampton, so quite a family affair for us.
Sounds like it. A family of alums from Hampton University. One. Let's just coin it. The most beautiful college campus in the states.
I'll
Would
se-
challenge
I'll
you to
s-
find a prettier one.
I will send you a
Right?
picture. Yeah.
Please do. All right. So at Hampton University, bachelor's degree in chemistry. Now we established in the pre-show, man, if I was bad at math, I was worse in chemistry, and we're talking it wasn't even a challenge. So why chemistry? And then I want to talk more about kind of your overall
Yeah,
journey and get
sure.
some of your highlights.
Sure. I guess I'll take you back to Wilson for a minute. I was always very good in math and science. I just really enjoyed it. It was very easy for me. And in my generation, when you were good in math and science, people wanted you to go into pre med, and because engineering was a little more abstract, maybe physical sciences were a little different, so it was steering you toward pre med. And when I was in high school, I went to it was called a governor's program. A lot of states have governor schools and those kinds of things, and I went in science because I love science. And one of the things we did was we went to Wake Forest Bowman Gray School of Medicine. See how it's so vivid in my mind. I remember the name, everything, and
Love it.
we went to a it was there was a room and there were hearts on the table, and it was supposed to be you look at these hearts, you start to understand the science behind it because you're on the pre med track.
Gotcha.
This when I walked, the smell got me first, just,
Really?
you know, and then I never picked up the heart. It wasn't for me. And I said,
Okay,
"Boy,
so
this is
Tanya, hang on a
just
sec. Hang on a
couldn't
sec.
do it."
You're talking real hearts. I was thinking shapes. You're talking real
Nah,
hearts?
no,
No.
no, no, organs, real organs, real
Organs.
organs, organs.
Wha-
If you're going into
Okay.
medicine, that's a good thing.
Gotcha.
That's a great experience. It was also a
Right.
good
Okay.
experience, and one of the lessons is that I think it's always good to know what you don't wanna do or what you're not capable of. In my case, I wasn't capable of going down that path. And so right, it was good, and I still like science. And then we also had, like, an astronomy section, and we had a physics section and all those kinds of things, and I knew right away that, okay, I like math and science, but I you don't want me operating on anybody, So, when I when I went to Hampton, I was actually an engineering I started out as a mechanical engineering major,
Okay.
and chemistry was one of the prereqs for any engineering school. As you know, chemistry and engineering were almost identical. Maybe first couple of years of the core curriculum, and there were some differences for engineering and that kind of thing. And I took the first chemistry class, and I just really enjoyed it. And I know that's hard for you to believe, but I just really I enjoyed it. And I, talked to my advisor, and it was my freshman year, so there wasn't much lost time or anything. Still had to take the same amount of math up through differential equations, Calc 3, and all those kinds of things. But I really enjoy the lab work. I just enjoy the science behind it.
Love that. And I would, we need more folks from all walks of life, all academic disciplines in global supply chain, including folks that love chemistry, right? I had a show not too long ago, Tonya, with someone that majored in the fine classical arts, and he never thought he
Ah,
had found himself in supply chain, but he found supply chain. Still loves art, right, and that creative side, but now he's applying all of that to global supply chain. I'm like, that it's a
yeah.
beautiful thing.
Yeah,
So,
I think the tie
right,
is the scientific method is similar, right? You different problems for sure, but I think if you think about problems as a hypothesis and how do you solve them, you can get there. You can
right,
get there.
I'm with you. I'm with you. So, all right, some bachelor's degree in chemistry from Hampton University in beautiful Virginia. Later, advanced degrees from Vassar College and Ohio University. As we established, you started with Lexmark at its inception in '91, and now here in 2022, you're in the C-suite. Incredible journey. Some of those travel stories that I'd love to get into. We'll have to have you back to talk more about that. But so much to talk about, so little time.
Sure.
As you look back on that journey, um, what's a couple things that come to mind that really shaped who you are?
Sure. I think when I graduate when I while I was at Hampton, I did couple 2 interviews with IBM in Manassas, Virginia, which is Northern Virginia.
Yep.
And good they were real jobs. I mean, it wasn't, kind of come in, let's introduce you to something. It was a real assignment, real projects, and those kinds of things. And back at Hampton, you had to present what you did for the summer anyway. So it was in, everybody's best interest to have those things aligned. But I enjoyed IBM, and when I graduated, I was I had an offer from IBM Raleigh, Research Triangle Park, and
Okay.
Manassas, and Poughkeepsie, New York.
You had three different offers from Big Blue.
The Big Blue, and Big Blue was
Wow.
a big deal. It still is,
Right.
but it was a really big deal in those days, right? And so if you listen to that story again, North Carolina, Virginia, New York. I chose New York, and I can only say so I'd never been to New York, and I thought it would be really an interesting thing. I enjoy New York. I love the people in New York. Have no problems, but the cost of living was insane.
I
So
bet.
we transferred back. I got married during that time. We transferred back down to Kentucky, IBM Lexington at the time, and then we were sold and became Lexmark, which was a liberating kind of experience. We talked a little bit about the formality. IBM is very formal. I don't think it is
Right.
anymore, but it was very formal. And Lexmark became it was a spinoff, and we were just in the imaging space. It was almost like a startup mentality, and we started with a different printing technology, and I was in the new part of the printing technology, which was called inkjet. Right now, we're focused on laser, but
Right.
the lesson in that process, that's when I probably grew up the most, and because you did everything, you were starting. They were starting a new business, so you were R&D, you were procurement, you were kind of supply chain, and I'll tell you that why how I ended up in supply chain. But so it was very good, and I'd say one of my lessons there is my all time favorite manager there. His name was Russ Stewart. He really taught me a big lesson in leadership, and that was, you put the markers out there and say, "This is where we're going," but you don't tell people how to get there. You don't. You got you can participate. You can be a sounding board, but he really set big goals and gave everybody all kinds of opportunity to fail, which was often, but it was there wasn't a punishment for that. It was less okay that we learned from that. Let's go try something else. And over the course, he was a manager, but also a very good friend. And because of just the trust that he had in me from a very young age. I tell the story about he was a double E. He was an electrical engineer, and he
Okay.
asked me because he knew my chemistry background, and he said, "I want you to go do all of this." It was a largely material science job, a material engineering. I'm a chemistry major, and I said, "Russ, Russ, I'm not a material scientist." He said, "I'm a double E. What's the difference? Chemistry, material science, whatever. Just go do. You can figure it out." But he didn't just throw me at it. He also gave me a mentor and someone who was many years my senior, but he embraced the role to say, okay, I'm gonna impart wisdom here. I'm gonna you're gonna definitely learn, but I'm going to be passing you information. You're not just observing here. I'm gonna start this and you're gonna pick it up. So it was set up very, very well from that perspective in terms of a big assignment and a very good support system. Um, one of
So
my
really quick,
some
Russ Stewart, it sounds like
what
to me, if I may interrupt just for a second, Tanya,
Sure,
it sounds like to me we need more Russ Stewart's approaches to management and leadership in industry. Based just
absolutely.
a little bit of what you just shared there, just to enable and empower folks to fail. That in and of itself, um, that's how we learn and innovate and grow and get outside of our comfort zone and have those eureka moments, right?
Yeah, we talk a lot about it, about trust and those kinds of things, and it's easy words to say, but it's difficult to execute. But when you do, it's real, and you get more and more confident. And I think as a young person, like you said, going from I'm a chemistry major. I did a lot of chemistry when I was working in IBM in New York, um, but the more different that I was able to do so many different assignments and get more confidence because nobody. And the other thing is, I'd say he believed in you. That's a big part of
Mm,
growing up too. And I think the more you are able to work in an environment where you can't. I mean, you have to have success. I'm not sitting here saying you continue to fail, but you stumble, and there's this. Okay, what'd you learn? Let's go get it done, and that gave me the confidence to try different jobs because I'd say many people had more confidence in me before I had confidence in myself in terms of what I could do.
I love that. There's so much you just shared in the last 6 minutes that I think a lot of folks can relate to and hopefully draw on. What else? When you look back at your journey,
Yeah,
especially with a key eureka, so it's clearly Russ Stewart was a
yeah,
big player in that journey. What else comes to mind?
yeah. So I'll go back to my developing this the inkjet printhead. One of the things, and I think many companies are doing it, and I'll give Lexmark all the credit in the world for really believing and putting plans in place to rotate people. So we had a belief, and we still do, that to grow in the leadership ranks, it is important to look at to sit in different parts of the business, right? Because you grow your leadership. You never your biggest growth is when you're managing an area that you're not familiar with. If you're familiar with it, there's a tendency to be I'm not going to say everybody's a micromanager, but they could be because you literally understand the space. But when you move to a
Right.
different space, that's when you learn how to lead because you can't do stuff because you're not the subject matter expert. And so one of the things within Lexmark that we try to do is rotate people. So I moved to the first of all, I moved to the sustainability group, which was super broad and internal and external, and probably one of my biggest growth opportunities because I did not really know the space at all, and I really had to rely on some key people who were willing to take me on and teach me. And I think there's a humility that you have to have when you switch jobs
Right.
because
Right.
unless you're some insane um, unless you have an
Cowboys
insane
fan.
ego, exactly. You can't go to a new place that you don't. really know and think you and try to act like you do. You just can't, right? Because everybody knows the truth. And I think when you what you learn from that, I like to say you learn how to learn, because when you switch jobs or you go to a different rotation place, it is a very there's a feeling of inadequacy. And I'm saying that for me. I can't speak for other people, but you knew what you were doing over here, and now you go to a new place and you just don't. And you think you know you should. You're the leader of the organization, but there's just things you don't know. And so the first time you do that, there's a it's really it's hard. You're excited. There's this line between you're really excited and there's a fear thing. You're going back
Right.
and forth. Um, and but you learn that, okay, this is going to get better every day, and next month it's going to be a little bit better, and then you finally find your groove, so that the next time that you make a move, it's just as bad. The feeling is just as
Yep.
bad, but I can get through this because I've done this, right? I know what this process feels like. And so the longer you delay doing that in your career, the harder it is when you finally make that move, because it's the first time that you really are like
Right.
back on your heels, like, oh my goodness, what are these people saying? I don't understand, kind of thing. So so when after sustainability though, we wanted to say, okay, R&D, there's always this tension, right, between R&D and supply chain. There just is a healthy tension, but there's a tension.
Why
So
why
what
is
we
that?
why well, I think it's there's a there is the design stage, and then there's a manufacturing. So the design, you can build, you go from 10 to 10 million, right? And
Right.
so what does that handoff look like? How do you sustain it, and all of those types of things? The challenge is that the people on one side are never on the other side, and the people so there's this, why don't they do this thing that goes
Right.
on both sides?
Right.
And
Right.
so we
It's a
moved.
healthy tension, as you said.
It's a healthy tension, but neither side, I mean, well, it's possible, but you gain more empathy for both sides if you rotate, because
Yes.
there's some real good reasons, for example, as to why things are designed that may be difficult to support from the supply chain side.
Right.
Really good reasons. There's also
Right.
good reasons that maybe you don't need to do some things on the design side in order for the supply chain side to support. But until you rotate, you don't have that. You just don't have that empathy. I wouldn't say you don't. It's harder to have that empathy.
Right.
So I moved over
Really quick,
to. Oh,
really
sorry. Go
quick,
ahead.
Tanya, what as you describe that, it takes me back to my metal stamping days in a manufacturing plant where I worked with some of the smartest people I've ever worked with. Brilliant, innovative, problem. They're going to find a way through it. And in particular, as you're describing that kind of that practical, the supply chain side, and um, that product development, that we're going to make tools to make certain parts. We're still figuring out what the parts look like. Man, to be in a room full of those folks as they're having and marking up drawings and kind of figuring out what has to happen, what needs to
Right.
happen, and just having that tension, that healthy tension play out. It's one of the best parts about what I would call manufacturing, global supply chain innovation, but practical innovation. So we can make what we come up with, or we can produce what we come up with.
Right.
It's a wonderful part about industry. So thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that tension between those two sides. And no
I think
wonder
it's
where the rotation comes into play. No wonder you got organizations can gain so much from that.
sure, sure, because you see, it's almost like you finally say, "Oh, I see why they did it that way.
Right.
I see why they're asking me instead of I don't know why they're bugging me with this." It's like, "Oh, I get it, because if I, done this differently." So when I moved over to supplies, I moved over to what we call supplies operations, which is our cartridges, or we have hardware, and then we have
Gotcha.
the supply portion of that. So I was on the R&D side on inkjet supplies. So develop the supplies, now move to manufacturing. And that's and so keep in mind, when we did that, it was a startup. We kind of did it all, but now it ballooned to millions and millions of cartridges, right? And when I saw what I had developed, it was the ugliest supply chain you can ever imagine, right? It was just stuff. It was just, and I did it for, I was like, well, you, when you're designing something, you're trying to find something that works. And if a supplier is here, there, it's like, this works, right? And so you go with it. But I had a better appreciation when I went to try to support that of because supplies live a long time. You continue to
Right.
use supplies. I had a better appreciation of okay, I think I got it. This is they're different. I could have made different decisions, or could
Right.
I? In some cases, you can't. That's the thing, though. You can't. But then how do you build something? Okay, this is the decision I need to make for this technology, but what's the best way to put it in an operation so that it can be sustained? So that
Yes.
was kind of how I ended up in supply chain from the operation side, and then I stayed after that, and I've been here for since then, and now we've combined the organizations together. But it 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 gives you a little bit of a bilingual a little bit because sometimes the other problem that organizations have is they just don't speak the same language. They're not
Right.
angry. They're not they want to, but there's like I don't know what these people are saying to me kind of thing. So that has been
Absolutely.
a key thing for Lexmark's leadership program.
And especially as you're talking about kind of those language barriers, not just functionally within a global enterprise, but the geographically,
Right.
skill set. I mean, there's all sorts of barriers that can present themselves when we're talking about communicating key information, even within the same organization. So it sounds like to me, part of um, your background that has served you well is and has helped enable you to build those bridges amongst all the different aspects of organization that you lead is having experienced a lot of that and finally seeing the other side of the coin and then helping others see both sides of the coin.
Yeah,
So we can communicate and be on the same page more often and get more done.
absolutely. And listening is a key part of that.
Yes, I'm with you, man. If we could all of us listen just a little bit more, right? Um, So I want to there's so much I want to ask you. I know you got 1,000 things going on. I want to move forward a little bit to talk manufacturing. It's one of my favorite
Yeah.
aspects of global business. My granddad retired as a machine operator with Kimberly Clark way back in the day, and I never, because I didn't have an awareness of manufacturing, you know, I never sat down and talked about that as a high school or even a college student
Yeah.
because it just wasn't part. It was a it was in my blind spot, right? It wasn't until after college that I toured a manufacturing facility. We gotta change that. But um, let's talk about Lexmark, the culture. 10 straight years, if I got that right, with the Manufacturing Leadership Award from the Manufacturing Leadership Council, which for
Right.
folks may not know, that's affiliated with the National Association of Manufacturers, which does a good job of creating more awareness for the manufacturing industry, which love what they do there at NAM. So let's talk to win the award once, much less 10 times. What aspect of the Lexmark culture enables that to happen, Tanya?
It's a great question. I was thinking about that as I was preparing for this because I don't because as you said, it's been 10 years, and so now I don't think we even think about what it's just kind of normal. And I'll tell
Right.
you how we got here, which I'd say stay with me on this one. But in supply chain, in manufacturing, there's a lot of firefighting. Just facts. Nope, nobody's fault. It just is, right? And so as the leader of the organization, I was always informed. Visible people, project firefighting things were visible to me. The projects that were the that were planned, that were either strategic or that were continuous improvement that were happening weren't so visible to me because they worked, right? Everything
Right.
everything was working.
Right.
And that's a good thing, right? For sure. But the what we were unintentionally communicating is that if it's something on fire, then it's going to be, I'm going to have visibility to it. And if things are working, I'm not. So what we implemented several years ago now, around that time, that's why I said it did occur to me that this is part of it. We started what we call a project meeting. That's we're simple people here that we don't have fancy names. It's just project meeting. So, and what it was we put a shared file out there, and anybody that had a project could sign up. My direct staff, I said, if you've got somebody working on something in your area that you want not if something's on fire, and it's an employee led project, right? This isn't a management update. This employees coming in and presenting. It's a 1 hour meeting once a month, 30 minute, two projects, 30 minutes each. So because there's a learning in presenting your project, and being saying, okay, they knock this out in 30 minutes, and this is what we did, this is why we did it,
Right.
and this is the next steps. And so there's a any project doesn't there's no it doesn't have to meet a certain criteria, it doesn't have to save X dollars. It just, you want to talk about your project. And so through that process, the we the projects that are winning are from that process. When
Right.
the staff listens to all of the projects throughout the year, and there are things that are really moving the business forward, things that we said this is what we want to go do strategically. They're working. There's more work to do for sure, but that's the funnel, if you will, of the key projects. So as part of the project reporting tool, what we were doing is taking output from those key projects, and then we would meet as a staff and say, okay, what do we want to submit for the Manufacturing Leadership Award? And at the beginning, it was very central to what we were doing as an organization. But the cool thing lately is they are very cross functional. They include some collaboration in terms of, let's say, product allocation and those kinds of things with the sales team. They include things like inventory management and those kind of things with finance. They include some of the IoT work that we're doing with our connected technologies team. So, but all of them are just coming. What we have to fight fires. We have to run the business. We have to serve customers. And unfortunately, people who are in supply chain, no matter what you do, how good you are, something's going to happen, and you still have to
Right.
manage that. But but people in the organization need to know that's not the only thing that is rewarded, and that we want to make time to hear. So that's our culture, if you will. Is basically a shared document. Sign up, first come, first serve, and and we get some really good projects out of that.
I love that. Um, Quick follow up, and then I want to talk more about supply chain and some of y'all's priorities this year and beyond. You mentioned a couple times in your last response that firefighting problems, curveballs, it comes with the territory here in global supply chain. Do you
Does.
think that consumers? Do you think one of the silver linings of the last couple of years, maybe prior to the pandemic and prior to the last few years, consumers may not have realized how much heroism, I'll call it, and brave from frontline across industry, a variety of different aspects, all that has to get done for us to conveniently walk into a store with reliability, probably far too often than we deserve, pick whatever we need, whatever flavor, all kinds of different variety and choices, pay for it at the price we want. I mean, it's remarkable. I would argue, love to get your take. These last few years, hopefully the consumer are very a savvy, educated consumer. That's one more thing that they've gained perspective wise in the last few years to understand and appreciate what supply chain folks have to do.
I think it depends.
Okay.
I
All right.
think
Good. Good.
I think people. The one thing I've noticed, and I'll go with my own. I have 3 daughters, and one of the things is the what do you call it? The delivery time, or the before it would be, if I can't get it tomorrow, I'm not ordering it. Now it's like, oh, okay, I can deal with it in 3 weeks, 4 weeks. That the expectation has changed. But I do think it's still the complexity of the supply chain, like, meaning something happens in this country, and I'm not sure people understand, well, why does it impact this over here, and for how long?
Right.
I think that's still uh, there's still some understanding there, but at the end of the
Right.
day, Scott, I think people just want their stuff, and
Right.
it it doesn't really, they don't. It's up to
All the
us
rest,
to
all the
to
rest is
try to figure that
non-value
out.
added, is what you're saying,
Yes.
Tanya. All the rest is
Yeah.
non-value added. They don't care about it. They want their stuff at the
They,
price
they
and the time. Right.
They want their stuff, and
Want
it's
their
funny
stuff.
you talked about. I think the other thing that is changing, perhaps more internally than to the consumer. And part of the organization that we formed together, what we are learning is the leverage internal, the things that we can influence to help with that disruption. So, meaning a lot of the design work that we can do to have more commonality in design, to have somewhat more simplification, to have more sources of the same components, because something is going to happen in some country. It just is.
Right.
And so, the more versatility we can have internally to overcome some of that, so people can get their stuff, is
Yes.
really, where what we're learning internally. But I wish I could say people are more tolerant. I'm not so sure. And I don't know that that's wrong. I mean, because uh, we got to rise up and meet the hit the bar.
That is true. That is true. We'll come back. We'll circle back on that. The jury's still out, maybe in some regards, but I like many things you shared. But one of those in particular, having those more options, more sourcing options, more trust-filled relationships that you can go to when those things that you've pointed out happen. Inevitably, they do, and it's tough to, as we've learned. I think one of the other things we've learned the last couple of years, as my dear co-host Greg White puts it, it's tough to what does he say? It's tough to start a friendship when you need it, rather than kind of invest in it before you need it,
Ye-
right? And then but we'll save that for another time. I want to talk about supply chain priorities for your global supply chain operations at Lexmark. You've been leading that aspect and more of the business, but that in particular since 2013. Um, so much we could really nerd out on all things supply chain. It's an intriguing time, challenging but intriguing time to be in that. When you look at your priorities for your organization this year and beyond, what are some of those
Yep.
things you can share?
Yeah, the first I think is a priority. It could be a priority for any organization, but certainly for our organization, especially given the year we talk about last year, but it's this has been going on for a long time. This
Right.
disruption is to care for our people. They have been phenomenal, especially people in this space, as you said, people. The stress that's been in that kind of supply chain part of the organization,
Right.
the stress has been on individuals has been incredible, and we've weathered some storms. The people have been incredibly resilient, resourceful, and just amazing. And I would say from my organization, our competitive advantage is the people. That's a complete sentence. In end, they've been phenomenal, and that's the whole product delivery team, which is the supply chain is a portion of that. So we have to figure out this year. That's one of our key pillars this year is employee experience, and we have to figure out. We have to communicate and talk and listen because we know we need to do more, but it's different. I mean, what people different they're different people need different, you know, um, initiatives around recognition, around well-being, around growth, and those types of things. So our focus this year, like our number one, is that now let me be clear. We know we got to go get cost
No.
out, and we know we have to do availability. I'm not that's like yes, of course, but to to what we've done to your point, what all companies have done over these past 2 years, the people have been incredible. You can talk about digital transformation all you want, but there's just people that have just been figuring things out because nothing's normal. Everything is, chaotic. So that's one of our key focus areas is what
Yep.
do we do from an employee experience, and how do we, especially from I'd say career development, are there rotational opportunities? Are there cross training opportunities? Those types of things, because there's a burnout situation. And so, can we move someone to another area that is more that where they are learning as part of their professional development as well? I mean, obviously, it's a both and. It's company opportunity as well as the person. So what do we do then? What do people need in terms of recognition in this virtual world? We used to do a lot of gatherings and those types of things. And globally now, we can maybe do a little bit better virtually, but there's a limit as to how long people want to
Right.
be on a Teams call. The second one, I'd say, no
Wait a
doubt,
second.
is
You
is
mean
improve.
folks are teams or zoomed out? Is that what you're telling me? Like,
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
so, so Tanya, do you ever, are you like me? And maybe some of our listeners can relate to. Do you ever kind of, after your 27th Zoom or Teams or whatever video call of the week, and then you've got just a cell phone call, you kind of, that's almost like a silly luxury these days, but where it's audio only. Do you feel that same
Yes,
thing, Tanya?
it's great. Yes, I do. I do.
I'm with you. I am with you.
I
All right. So
do.
you were
I
talking.
do.
So folks are, they have
Yeah, I think
conference call. They're remoted out. What? Continue your
yeah,
thought
I
there.
think so we're focused on what do we need to do as an organization to improve our employee experience. What and again, I don't have the answer for that. I think I've got thoughts, but they may not be relevant to a particular group. So we've got to do some listening there. And the other one, which you talked about, is I'm going to put it in a big bucket. That's just improve our agility and flexibility. That could look like, you know, how we manage risk. That should be it could be the normal operational type things, but it's also, as I said, it's a combination of the design, um, and the operation to the customer, any kind of return back from a service perspective. What do we need to do differently? And it kind of looks like, um, concept that's out that's called design thinking. And you think about design thinking in terms of either UX, or you think about it in terms of designing products, but it's much broader than that. And what it means, for us, is that there may be some obvious solutions that are right in front of us, that we have mental barriers that we can't do. So just kind of taking a step back and saying, okay, we've got these problems. Let's really think about it differently. Because I can tell you, during the crisis, we did a lot of outside of the box thinking, as did everybody. And there were many things that we said we couldn't do, but when you are like at the end of the rope, you do it, and you live through it. And so
Yes.
institutionalizing that good behavior, without a crisis, is something that we want to do. But it's really, the world is the world, and the expectation is that people just want their stuff. And so we have to do better with agility and flexibility. And we just have to. And that means that there's a lot of bullets underneath that, but that's kind of what we're thinking.
Outstanding. I love that, especially going back to your first part of your answer, that employee experience. I know that employee experience, user experience, customer experience, there's all these X's. But, even if they are cliches, the actions behind them, the fact that they are priorities like they are
Yeah.
at Lexmark, that is a wonderful thing. And I look again at that's part of the silver lining, with the pandemic. And it's been a lot of pain and heartbreak for a lot of folks. But if industry can learn from these last couple of years and then act on it like y'all are doing, we're going to be stronger, and our workforces will be in a better spot moving forward. So I appreciate that, Tanya. I want to,
Absolutely.
you strike me, and maybe I'm wrong. We don't go back. We may be third cousins, but we don't go that
I
far.
thought
We
we
got
were
to do our homework
cousins at the
afterwards.
beginning. Are we separating now?
Right. No. Well, so you strike me as a pretty humble leader, and maybe I'm wrong. And usually when I interview humble leaders, they don't like talking about themselves and their own recognition. But let's face it, industry has recognized you with a lot of different accolades and awards, including here recently, notable woman in supply chain and logistics. So tell me, Tanya, from where you sit, how can we as an industry, global supply chain, how can we do better to provide opportunities and advancement, not just the opportunities, but once you give them the opportunity, kind of like what Russ Stewart did, you know, challenge you with the opportunity, but then help you. But even if you fail, he's going to help you fail, succeed, move forward, advance. How do we do that better?
Yeah. I think I'll go back to my own kind of how I got here, if you will. Like I said, there were people who believed in me and gave me opportunities that I didn't know even existed. And so I think one of the things we can do better is recognize that, I'd say, mileage differs, right? People get their different ways, and they start in different places. And so just because someone hasn't demonstrated something, it could be that they're unaware of the opportunity. they haven't had someone talk to them about, hey, did you think about this? Did you think about that? So I think this whole, if you call it equity, like, where do you start? Where's everybody starting from? And making sure that we don't exclude someone because they haven't demonstrated something. Give people a chance, and but you gotta be patient, right? Because if they haven't, if they've been going down this track, and now you say, hey, let's go try this, you have to, what I could say, you have to give people some grace here and let them get there on their own way.
Mm.
And I think as a leadership team, we have to, what I've started doing is, we have a we had a initiative called Chat It Up with an executive. So it was a global teams call, right? And people, and you talk more about that it was an introduction of me, or as an executive, as a person, like asking about product availability was out of bounds. They couldn't do it. But there were some
You can talk
questions.
Steelers though, right?
You could talk Steelers, but you couldn't say,
Okay.
where am I going to get my stuff? So, but there were some people who had some really good questions related to opportunity and those kinds of things. So afterwards, I chat, like virtual chat, and then follow that up with a phone call, or a virtual phone call. So I think for the leaderships, if some people are hungry for information and they don't quite know where to go, I think it's up to us to try to connect with those folks, and then help them connect, with where they want to go, to kind of navigate, if you will, to help people. And part of that is making yourself available and accessible, because you want to make sure that, I always want to make sure I'm accessible. I might not be available because of time, but that's a different thing. You don't want to be viewed as not accessible. So I think giving people access to you is hugely important, because, like I said, I benefited from people sitting me down and saying, these are the opportunities that you don't even know about, and why don't you
Mm.
try this, and pushing me in many cases to go do something. And um, I try to do that with other with people as well. The other thing I try to tell people is, we are looking for authenticity. We're looking for people who, um, I like to say, everybody has a thought bubble over their head, you know.
Right.
And so when I ask somebody a question, I'm like, I want to hear the thought bubble. I don't, I don't want to hear, because people, you may say what you think somebody wants to hear, and what you're really looking for is what you really think. And that takes trust as well. That doesn't just happen. And so I think making sure that, especially as you're building an organization, that I'm trying to make sure people understand they can say what they want to say, uh, because we all need to hear it. And so try to make sure that people are really uh, communicating, and making sure that people are communicating in a way that, they believe is speaking truth.
Mm. So much there. So much there. I really appreciate your time here today. Again, we didn't get to some of those travel stories. I bet you've got quite a few, but we'll have to have you come back next time. Um,
Yeah.
uh, so let's make sure folks know how to connect with the pride of Wide Awake Wilson, North Carolina, Tonya Jackson, and of course Lexmark, organization
Well,
on the move. When the culture you describe and you paint a picture of, it sounds like it's a pretty rewarding experience to be part of the Lexmark team. But how can folks learn more and to connect with you, Tonya?
sure. So I would give you my LinkedIn profile. I mean, my LinkedIn address. We could certainly share that. Lexmark.com also has a social media aspect of it as well, that we can make sure that you get. So I think those are probably the primary avenues. Would be something on LinkedIn, and something from a Lexmark social media campaign.
Wonderful. And we're going to make it really easy for folks. That one click that we're all after, we'll load that up in the show notes of the episode so that you can connect and learn a lot more about what's going on over in the world
So,
of Lexmark. Tonya, you're going to add?
so yeah, you talked about Wide Awake Wilson. What part of South Carolina are you from?
I am
Are you from Aiken?
Aiken. Yeah. How'd you know that?
You said that. So you're from Refrigerator
Of course.
Perry's hometown. Hmm.
That's right. In fact, I'm a big Clemson fan. And so you had
All right.
Fridge,
Okay.
right? And then you had Michael Dean Perry, his younger brother, who went by the name Icebox. He was just a little bit smaller. And his little brother had a great career with the Cleveland Browns, which some folks may not remember.
I don't remember
But
him. Okay.
we still pass by his house where he grew up and his home that he built when he made it big with the Bears there in Aiken
Okay.
County. So, yeah. Um,
Okay.
so we're gonna have to compare. It sounds like every once in a while, Tonya, we've got a show here. Supply Chain Nerds Talk Sports, and it's supply chain's not allowed. It's kind of like maybe your chatted up sessions. It's all
Awesome.
about all that's going on in sports, because we need, as you know, we need to close email for a second, take a deep breath, and enjoy each other's company. Talk about things that aren't work related to protect that that psyche. So then we can go
Yeah.
back the next day and make it happen. So, Tonya, Jackson, I couldn't imagine. It's got to be cool to work with you, work for you. Thanks so much for carving some time out with us here today. I really appreciate your time here today, Tonya.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. Had a good time.
We'll have to have you back. We've been chatting with Tonya Jackson, Senior Vice President and Chief Product Delivery Officer with Lexmark. We'll talk with you again very soon, Tonya.
Thank you.
You bet. Okay, so folks, hopefully you enjoyed this conversation, this wide-ranging, frank, authentic, passionate conversation we had here with Tonya Jackson. There's lots of, whether you're breaking into industry, whether you're leading people, first-time manager or a senior manager, senior leader even, there's so much to learn here from Tonya Jackson's story and journey. If you like conversations like this, be sure to find and subscribe to Supply Chain Now wherever you get your podcast. And folks, whatever you do like this. Be like Tonya. Do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. And on that note, we'll see you next time right back here at Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being a part of our Supply Chain Now community. Check out all of our programming at supplychainnow.com and make sure you subscribe to Supply Chain Now anywhere you listen to podcasts. And follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. See you next time on Supply Chain Now.